the transparent liquid that makes up the world's lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, and more than 70% of the human body, water is and always has been the most important resource to all features of the natural and human world. Yet the importance of water stems beyond its impact in its initial form. Humanity has created hundreds of methods to harness water's innate and powerful potential, and they can be broken down into three methods of impact: agricultural, household, and industrial.
In the agricultural sector, water is a form of life for all plants and crops being grown. In India, China, the United States, and Pakistan alone, more than half the irrigated land in the world is used. In the United States, approximately 1/3 of all fresh water is used for irrigation. Irrigation itself is comprised of 4 different types. The first type, furrows, are trenches that are dug so water can run through them and reach the roots of multiple plants. It is 65% efficient, with the rest of the water running off as waste. Next is flooding, where a field is flooded with water so the liquid can be absorbed evenly on the surface. It is 70 to 80% efficient. Third is the spray method, utilizing giant sprinklers, which is a bit more expensive and uses more energy. However, this method is 75 to 95% efficient. Last is the most effective method, at 95% efficient, the drip method. A slow dripping hose is put underneath the surface of soil or is put on top of the soil in order to be absorbed. This method is particularly good for orchards because for seasonal crops, the hose doesn't need to be moved or removed out of season. Another way water is used is through hydroponic agriculture, which are essentially greenhouses. These are used year-round to make more crops under ideal growth conditions with little to no pesticides being used. The roots of the plants are submerged not into soil, but nutrient-rich solution, and it uses up to 95% less water than other irrigation methods. In the household sector, 10% of all water is used in households. For that 10%, 41% is for flushing toilets, 33% is for bathing, 21% is for laundry, 5% is for cooking and drinking. For varying places in the U.S., their water usage varies to a great level. In California, a typical household uses about 6 times more water outdoors than the typical Pennsylvanian family. The problem with fresh water, though, is that more than 1 billion people, nearly 15% of the world's population, lack access to clean drinking water. Every year, 1.8 million people die of diarrheal diseases related to contaminated water. 90% of those people are children under 5 years old. 5,000 people in the world die every day because of lack of access to clean water. Poor conditions in many developing countries do not provide safeguards that ensure the availability of clean drinking water. Water is such an important resource, yet for so many around the world, it is a resource that they don't get the chance to use.
In the industrial sector in the U.S., half of all water used goes towards generating electricity. Some water is returned to its source and some is consumed. For example, water that passes through a hydroelectric turbine is withdrawn from a reservoir to generate electricity, but that water is not consumed. Instead, it goes back to the river. Some of the water used is not returned to the source from which it was removed, but instead becomes water vapor. Thermoelectric power plants are large consumers of water. In this nuclear reactor in Germany, they heat water to make the steam that turns electrical turbines, but the steam must be cooled back down first. During the cooling of the steam, a great deal of water vapor is released to the atmosphere. Basically, steam needs to be cooled and condensed before going back to water source. Massive cooling towers are created to allow the steam to condense. Additionally, refining metals and paper requires large amounts of water. For example, copper, which is used for electrical wiring, uses about 116 gallons of water per kilogram to refine. Aluminum, which is used for automobiles and foil, uses about 108 gallons. Steel, which is used for appliances and buildings, uses about 68 gallons. And paper uses about 33 gallons of water to manufacture. We would now like to welcome Billy Johnson and Luke Hull to the show. Billy is a hydrologist from New Jersey, and he will be starting off our conversation tonight about water resources.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Billy, is there something you can tell us about the availability of fresh water and salt water?
Well, yes, Rehana. 70% of the Earth is covered by water. Approximately 97.22% of that water is salt water, leaving less than the 3% remaining to be fresh water. Of that 3% of fresh water, almost half of it is frozen in ice, and about 1/4 of it is underground in what we call aquifers.
Speaking of aquifers, I heard you recently performed a study in multiple states studying the Ogallala aquifer. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the aquifer itself spans over 8 states in the Midwest region of the United States and approximately 174,000 square miles. The Ogallala aquifer, being one of the world's largest aquifers, has points where it's a confined aquifer, meaning water cannot flow in and out of it, and parts where it's unconfined, where water can flow freely through the aquifer. The deepest part of the aquifer is in Ogallala, Nebraska, named after the aquifer, and that's where the epicenter of the aquifer is. At its deepest point, it's between 1,000 and 1,200 feet deep, and this being underground, it's clearly not available for us, but it could be a resource for us in the future if we figure out a way to use this water as a resource.
Wow, that was very enlightening. Who knew that water was so scarce? Now we have the pleasure of meeting Billy's research partner, Luke. He's an expert in the surface and atmospheric aspects of the sources of water.
Hi, Rehana. My recent studies on surface water and atmospheric water have allowed me to travel the globe and see some of the world's largest rivers and lakes. So this past year I was able to visit the Amazon River in South America and the Congo River in Africa. So these legendary rivers are not only known for their size but also for what they provide. So many major civilizations have been able to develop on the banks of these rivers due to the highly fertile land on their riverbanks due to the floodplains. So the floodplains is where the river overflows and nutrient-rich sediments are deposited on these floodplains, allowing for good land and fertile soil.
Very interesting. Now, Luke, I have seen some of your reports on some of the world's larger lakes, such as Baikal in Asia and the Caspian Sea in Western Asia, where you talk about tectonic activity and glaciation. Can you elaborate on these concepts?
Yes. These and other larger lakes are formed by tectonic activity, whether it's tectonic uplift, separating part of the ocean, or tectonic activity causing the land to split open and thus it fills with water, creating a lake. Glaciation is another way these large lakes can be formed. So basically the glacier scrapes these large depressions in the land and they fill with water. On another note, lakes can also be classified by their primary productivity as opposed to their size. So there's 3 types of lakes due to their primary productivity. So there would be oligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic lakes. Oligotrophic lakes have low productivity due to low amounts of nutrients. Mesotrophic lakes have a moderate level, and eutrophic lakes have a high level of nutrients.
Speaking of nutrients, can you explain the impact precipitation and human activities have on the fertility of soil?
Yes, this is a very important question. In addition to the direct losses of human lives, livestock, and crops that they cause, droughts have long-term effects on soil because the cycling of many nutrients important to ecosystem productivity, such as nitrogen and phosphorus, depend on the movement of water. Droughts affect nutrient cycling and thus soil fertility. Furthermore, prolonged droughts can dry out the soil to such an extent that the fertile upper layer, the topsoil, blows away in the wind. As a result, the land may become useless for agriculture for decades or longer. Finally, the soil that has become very severely parched may harden and become impermeable. In this case, when the rain finally does arrive, the water runs off the land surface rather than soaking it and eroding the topsoil process. And also, humans tend to harvest and overuse the land, taking out many of the nutrients. So the cycling of harvest and seasons allow them to keep their soil fertile and have good farming seasons.
One way that humans alter the availability of water is by using levees. A levee is an enlarged bank built up on each side of a river used to prevent flooding. They're good because they allow us to develop floodplain land for residential and commercial use. But when they fail, a lot of bad things can happen. Dikes are basically levees that prevent ocean water from flooding adjacent land. They're used with pumps that move any water that intrudes back out to the ocean. Originally, these pumps were powered by windmills, but now they're powered by electric and diesel pumps. There are dams too. A dam is a barrier that runs across a river or stream to control the flow of water. According to the environmental research writers, 48% of the world's river volume is affected by dams today, and that figure would nearly double if all dams planned or under construction are completed in the future. But dams interrupt the natural flow of water that many organisms are used to. To fix this problem, people use fish ladders, which are built like a set of stairs with water flowing over them. This way, fish can swim up these ladders and reach their breeding grounds. There are actually inventions that we made to move water rather than store it. Take aqueducts, for example, which are canals or ditches used to carry water from one location to another. There are current imminent dangers posed on aqueducts in Los Angeles. LA gets 88% of its water from 3 major aqueducts, which cross the San Andreas Fault a total of 32 times. Officials have warned that a massive earthquake on the San Andreas could destroy key functions of the aqueduct, cutting off water supply for more than 22 million people in Southern California. LA officials are now starting to take steps, and they estimate that it will probably cost billions of dollars. Desalination is just what it sounds like. It's removing the salt from salt water. One method of doing this is distillation. In distillation, heat is used to boil water, which leaves its salt behind as it evaporates. Another method is reverse osmosis, which is when water is forced through a thin, semi-permeable membrane at high pressures.
Alright, so one of the most controversial topics dealing with water is water ownership. Who owns it, and pretty much who controls it, alright? Because over the years there have been several wars in India where a river runs through the Indian Himalayas but has been providing water to Bangladesh for the last millennia. And the question is, does India have the right to divert that water to themselves and deprive Bangladesh of their water source? There really isn't a clear answer to it because no one really has the right to water, but several countries or organizations can have the right to use it. So that's why there have been so many conflicts over the specific ways or things that you can do to conserve water are improving like water faucets so they leak less, so you're saving more water, improving water fixtures, and also improving like washing machines. Okay? So after water is used, it is separated into 2 categories. Okay, you have contaminated water and gray water. Okay, contaminated water is water that cannot be used again and is really too toxic for anything. Okay, but gray water is wastewater that comes from baths, showers, bathroom sinks, and washing machines that can be used again. Okay, but this water is not acceptable to drink whatsoever. But it can be used for watering lawns, plants, and flushing toilets. So you can constantly reuse that water. But unfortunately, because the United States has such high regulations on water and all stuff, some states do not permit the use of this gray water. So this one technique that is very useful is going to waste like all the water. All right.